My name is Ethan Hale. I'm 33 years old, a threat intelligence analyst living in Austin, Texas, where food trucks cluster like metallic beetles under shade sails that snap and flutter in the late summer heat. From the outside, my life seems ordinary. Debugging anomaly detection systems for nonprofits and health partners, building digital walls against invisible threats. But this Tuesday afternoon, as I stepped away from my keyboard with a lukewarm Dr. Pepper and $20 cash, the cicadas seemed to carry an ominous warning. I didn't know that in just a few minutes, everything I believed about staying in my lane would be shaken to its core. I stood at the edge of the food truck park, propane burners hissing like angry cats, the smell of mesquite and onions thick enough to taste. Today felt significant, though I couldn't say why. Maybe it was the presentation I've been prepping, a security demonstration for the Lang Foundation's board next week. Or maybe it was the way the heat made everything shimmer, like reality was negotiable. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. That's when I saw Eli. He sat alone at a weathered picnic table, hands folded with the precision of someone who'd once worn latex gloves for a living. Eli Mercer was homeless, had been for 2 years, but he carried himself with a dignity that made you forget about his threadbare clothes and the blue heeler mix sleeping in the shade beside him. His white hair was combed, his beard trimmed with gas station scissors. When he smiled, which wasn't often, you glimpsed the man he used to be. "Afternoon, Ethan," he said as I approached, not looking up from where he was methodically folding napkins into neat squares. "Brisket's good today. Mrs. Ortiz saved the burn ends." I'd been sharing lunch with Eli for 3 months now, ever since I'd noticed him feeding his dog before himself. There was something about his steady hands, the way he spoke in complete sentences, that made me keep coming back. Today, though, he seemed different. Alert, like a paramedic waiting for a call. "How's Button doing?" I asked, settling across from him. The dog lifted her head at her name, one ear cocked, then resumed her vigil. "She's fine. Worried about storms. Dogs know things we don't." Eli accepted half my sandwich with a nod, then said something that made my stomach drop. "You're presenting to the Lang Foundation next Tuesday. Board meeting downtown." I nearly choked on my bite. "How do you—" "He mentioned your client, building security for a health charity. Only one foundation in Austin with that profile." He tore his portion into careful pieces, offering Button a morsel that she wouldn't take until he nodded permission. "Figured you should know who you're working for." The heat seemed to press down harder. Eli wasn't supposed to know anything about my job, let alone my specific clients. I dealt in algorithms and audit trails, not whatever this was becoming. "Eli, what's going on?" Instead of answering, he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a slip of paper, grease-stained and creased from folding. A single phone number was written in blue ballpoint, followed by 3 words that made my chest tighten. "Time for revenge," he said quietly, sliding the paper across the scarred wood. The phrase hit me like a physical blow. Revenge. The word connected to something I'd buried deep. My friend Marcus from high school, dead at 17 when an ambulance got diverted to a private facility 20 minutes farther out. The medics said they had to follow protocol. Marcus bled out in the back of that rig, and I'd spent 15 years telling myself there was nothing anyone could have done. Revenge against who? My voice sounded strange, distant. Eli's eyes, pale blue like winter sky, fixed on mine. People who think other people don't matter. People who turn tragedy into profit margins. He gestured toward Button, who had moved closer to my leg as if sensing tension. "She won't eat until I say it's safe." Took months to teach her that, but once she trusted me, she'd follow me anywhere. I stared at the paper, the numbers swimming in the heat haze. Every instinct screamed at me to hand it back, to finish lunch, and return to my safe world of code and cryptocurrency trails. I wasn't an investigator. I wasn't a crusader. I was a guy who built digital fences and went home to Netflix. But Marcus's face floated in my peripheral vision, 17 forever, and I found myself pocketing the slip. "I'm not promising anything," I said. Eli nodded, as if he'd expected exactly that response. Button didn't promise anything either. First time I fed her.
We finished eating in silence, the cicadas building to their afternoon crescendo. When I stood to leave, Button followed me 3 steps before returning to Eli's shadow. It felt like a benediction and a warning rolled into one. At 6:07 that evening, I dialed the number. I made the call from my apartment balcony, where the city lights were just beginning to compete with the dying sun. The cicadas had traded shifts with the evening chorus, nighthawks and distant traffic creating Austin's twilight symphony. My hands were steadier than I'd expected as I entered the number, but my heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to escape. The phone rang twice before connecting to a voicemail system. "Hi, you've reached Mara. I'm probably elbow-deep in study guides or trying to save the world one bandage at a time. Leave me a message and I'll call you back when I surface for air. Promise." The voice was warm, teasing, alive, young, maybe mid-20s, with a slight Texas drawl that suggested East Austin roots. Definitely not what I'd expected from Eli's cryptic time for revenge. The beep came, and I almost hung up. Instead, I heard myself say, I got this number from Eli. I'm not sure why I'm calling." I ended the call and immediately felt foolish. A dead end, some random voicemail that... My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check saved messages. Password is button99. My pulse spiked. I called back, navigating to the saved voicemails with shaking fingers. The password worked. 7 messages, all from the same number, all time-stamped between 6 months and 2 years ago. The first one made my blood run cold. "Hey, Dad, it's me. I know you're still not talking to me, but I found something weird at the foundation. You know those roundup donations from the grocery apps? The ones where you can donate your spare change? Well, I've been tracking the numbers in my volunteer hours, and they don't add up. Like, consistently don't add up. The digital totals are always about 12% higher than what actually gets posted to the charity dashboard." Mara's voice continued, now clinical, focused. "Dad, I ran the math on 3 months of data. Dad, we're talking about $70,000 that just vanished. And there's this vendor code that keeps showing up, Rapid Response Partners. But when I asked Mr. Lang about it, he got really weird. Said it was for emergency equipment purchases, but I can't find any equipment orders that match the routing." I paused the message, my analyst brain already cataloging anomalies. Systematic variance in donation aggregation, phantom vendor codes, a foundation chair getting weird about routine questions. This wasn't random fraud. This was architecture. The second message was worse. "Dad, I'm scared. I tried to ask Ava in IT about the routing tables and she basically ran away from me. Then yesterday, this guy in a suit, expensive suit, like movie villain expensive, comes to my shift at the clinic and asks if I've been enjoying my volunteer work. He knew things, Dad. He knew I was tracking the numbers. How did he know that?" My hands were trembling now. I recognized the pattern. Digital surveillance, intimidation, systematic isolation of threats to the operation. I'd seen it in corporate espionage cases, but never in a charity context. The third message broke my heart. "It's 2 a.m. and I can't sleep. I'm at St. David's doing my clinical rotation, and we just had another ambulance diversion. Third one this week. The patient was stable when they loaded him, but the nearest ER was full, so they had to route to Lang Medical Partners instead. 23 extra minutes in transit. Dad, the guy didn't make it. Mara's voice cracked slightly. I keep thinking about what you used to say, about how every second matters, how the system only works if everyone follows the rules. But what if the rules are broken? What if someone changing them for money? The timestamp on that message was 2 years and 3 days ago. I checked my notes. According to the obituary I'd found online, Mara Mercer had died 2 years and 2 days ago. She'd recorded this message the night before she died. The last message was the shortest, and it destroyed me. Dad, I saved everything to the cloud backup. Routing logs, vendor contracts, the donation variant spreadsheets. If something happens to me, the password is your anniversary with Mom. You know, the one you celebrated every year even after she passed. I love you, Dad. And I'm sorry I couldn't fix this before. The message cut off. I sat on my balcony as darkness settled over Austin, holding a phone that connected me to a dead woman's voice, trying to process what I'd just learned. Mara Mercer had stumbled on what sounded like a massive fraud operation. She'd tried to get help, been intimidated, and died the next day, officially from complications following an ambulance diversion.
My phone buzzed. A text from my sister Tessa, who worked night shift at the county ER. Another diversion tonight, third this week, makes me sick. The pattern was there. Ambulance diversions, phantom vendors, missing donations, and at the center of it all, Dr. Victor Lang, whose foundation I was supposed to be securing next Tuesday. I opened my laptop and began documenting everything. Every timestamp, every routing anomaly, every detail that could be verified and preserved. If Mara had died for this information, I wasn't going to let it disappear into the digital ether. But first, I needed to understand exactly how much money we were talking about, and that meant going back to where it all started. The food trucks, the donation jars, and the algorithm that was designed to steal pennies and nickels from people just trying to help. As I worked, Button's words echoed in my mind. Time for revenge. Maybe. But if Mara Mercer had taught me anything in her final messages, it was that some things were more important than revenge. Some things demanded justice. The next morning, I stood at the food truck park with a different purpose. The cicadas were already warming up for their daily symphony, and Mrs. Ortiz was prepping vegetables behind the counter of her family's truck, Corazon de Austin. I'd bought coffee and tacos, but what I really needed were the donation records. Mrs. Ortiz, could I ask you about your charity jar? I gestured to the mason jar beside the register, half full of crumpled bills and loose change. A handwritten sign read, "Roundup for the Lang Foundation. Help local health." She wiped her hands on her apron, studying my face. "You're Eli's friend, the computer man." "Yes, ma'am. I'm helping with some accounting questions." She exchanged a glance with her husband, who nodded from the grill. Then she reached under the counter and produced a dog-eared composition book, the kind kids use for school reports. "We keep track, every day. My Roberto, he don't trust the digital things." She opened to pages covered in careful handwriting, dates, amounts, running totals. "Here, look. Yesterday, we collected $43.62, but the app, it says we sent $47.50 to the foundation." I photographed the pages, my pulse quickening. "This happens often?" "Every week, sometimes more, sometimes less.
Always the app shows higher than what we actually get." She frowned. "I thought maybe we count wrong, but Roberto, he's very careful with numbers." I cross-referenced her ledger against the Foundation's public donation dashboard on my phone. The pattern was unmistakable. A deterministic drift, small variances that aggregated into significant money over time. The rounding algorithm wasn't just collecting spare change, it was manufacturing donations that never existed. "Mrs. Ortiz, how many trucks participate in this program?" "Maybe 20 in Austin, more in Houston, Dallas." 20 trucks times 7 days times the variance I was seeing, we were looking at thousands of dollars weekly disappearing into phantom accounts. I called Tessa during her break. "The ambulance diversions you mentioned, they come from the Lang Foundation?" "Yeah, why? That new cardiac monitor in ICU has their plaque on it? Any idea how much the Foundation donates annually?" "Millions, I think. They're one of our biggest benefactors." Her voice sharpened. "Ethan, what's going on?" I stared at the mason jar, watching Mrs. Ortiz add a $5 bill from another customer. Such a simple system. Honest people trying to help, trusting that their small contributions would reach those who needed them most. I think someone's been stealing from people who can't afford to be stolen from. What do you need? Time to prove it, and maybe a contact in hospital administration who can show me equipment purchase orders. After I hung up, Button appeared at my feet, tail wagging cautiously. Eli emerged from behind the truck, where he had been sweeping the area clean. "Find what you were looking for?" I held up my phone, showing the photographic evidence. Just the tip of the iceberg. But Eli, this is bigger than revenge. This is systematic theft. His weathered face hardened. Then we better make sure it stops. Ava Brooks looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Dark circles rimmed her eyes as she clutched a coffee cup with both hands across from me in the loudest cafe near UT campus, a deliberate choice to drown our conversation in the chaos of grinding espresso machines and student chatter. "I shouldn't be here," she said for the third time, glancing at the exit. "But you are." I kept my voice gentle, non-threatening. "You built the rounding algorithm." Her hands trembled slightly. "It was supposed to be simple. Collect spared change from digital transactions, aggregate it weekly, and send it to approved charities. Clean code, clean conscience." What changed?
About 8 months ago, Dr. Lang asked me to add a vendor pathway. Said it was for rapid response equipment purchases. Ambulances, defibrillators, things that couldn't wait for normal procurement cycles. She took a shaky sip. The vendor ID was Rapid Response Partners. I thought it made sense. I pulled out my phone, showing her the photos from Mrs. Ortiz's ledger. The amounts don't match what people actually donate. Ava's face went pale. That's impossible. The algorithm only collects verified roundups from confirmed transactions. Unless someone modified it to manufacture donations that never existed. She was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. There's an internal audit bucket, S3-style storage, where all the ETL logs get dumped during nightly processing. If someone was manipulating the flow, there'd be traces. Can you get me access? God, no. But she lowered her voice even further. There's a stale IAM role from when I was debugging last year. Read-only permissions, expires in 72 hours. If someone happened to know about the 3 a.m. maintenance window when nobody monitors the logs... She slid a napkin across the table with what looked like random letters and numbers scrawled in pencil. That's not a back door. That's just sloppy security that I forgot to clean up. Ava, who else knows about this? Her expression darkened. Rook, Dr. Lang's assistant. He came to my desk last month. Very polite. Very professional. Asked how the donation architecture was performing. Then he mentioned that he knew where I lived, where my little brother goes to school. Said Dr. Lang valued loyalty. A chill ran through me. Physical intimidation, surveillance, isolation tactics. Classic corporate control strategy. I'll be careful, I promised. You don't understand. Ava stood abruptly, gathering her things. Rook doesn't make threats. He makes demonstrations. There's a reason nobody at the Foundation asks questions anymore. After she left, I sat in the cafe noise staring at the napkin with its cryptic access codes. My phone buzzed with a DM from someone named Maya Tran. Saw your vague tweet about rounding drift in donation algorithms. Investigative podcaster here. Want to talk? I'd forgotten about that late-night tweet, sent in a moment of frustrated activism. Now it felt like Providence. That night, I used Ava's back door to access the audit logs. What I found made my blood run cold. Systematic manipulation going back 2 years. Phantom donations totaling nearly $500,000. But as I worked, buttons started barking from the stairwell outside my apartment. Through my window's reflection, I caught a glimpse of a figure with a telephoto lens pointed directly at me. Rook had found me. Buttons' growling echoed through the parking garage stairwell like a warning bell. I found Eli crouched behind a concrete pillar, one hand on his dog's neck, the other pointing toward my building's entrance where a figure in an expensive suit held a telephoto lens. "How long has he been there?" I whispered. 20 minutes. Professional setup. He's got backup equipment, multiple angles. Eli's voice carried the calm authority of someone who'd worked emergency scenes. "You rattled something big." I pulled out my phone and started recording the surveillance, creating my own evidence trail. Rook noticed immediately, lowering his camera and turning our direction. Even from 50 yards away, I could see his cold smile. "We need to move," Eli said. "I know a place." He led me through a maintenance corridor I'd never noticed, Button trotting ahead like she'd mapped every inch of the building. We ended up in a fluorescently lit storage area where Eli had clearly been sheltering. A sleeping bag, some canned goods, and a combination lock on Unit 47. "Mara's things," he said simply, working the combination. "Kept them when the landlord cleared her apartment." Inside the narrow locker, boxes of nursing textbooks shared space with a laptop bag and manila folders thick with printed emails. But what stopped my heart was the backup phone, an older iPhone with a cracked screen still showing 23% battery. She made me promise to keep it charged, said if something happened, the backup files were more important than her actual phone. Eli's voice cracked slightly. "I've been carrying a portable charger for 2 years, keeping her digital ghost alive." I connected the phone to my laptop, and my hands started shaking as the files transferred. Email headers showing Lang's explicit approval for the Phantom vendor pathway, spreadsheets mapping donation discrepancies across 12 cities, voice memos where Mara had documented her growing fear. One clipped email made everything clear. Per our discussion, Rapid Response Partners will handle emergency equipment purchases through the donation overflow channel. This arrangement remains confidential per our non-disclosure protocols by V. Lang. "This is enough for probable cause," I told Eli. "Detective Alvarez won't be able to ignore this."
But Eli was staring at something else, a photo of Mara in her nursing scrubs, young and determined, holding a stethoscope like a weapon against the world's suffering. "She called it her revenge folder," he said quietly. "Everything she couldn't report through normal channels. She knew they'd try to silence her, so she documented everything." My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Can meet tomorrow. Bring everything you've got. I need to verify sources before we go public." "Eli," I said carefully, "when you gave me that number, you said, 'Time for revenge.' But this isn't about revenge anymore. It's about justice, about making sure Mara's work wasn't wasted." He nodded, scratching Button behind the ears. "Revenge would be easy. Justice takes witnesses, evidence, people brave enough to stand up in court." He looked at me with eyes that had seen too much loss. "You willing to do that?" "Yes, but I need you to be willing too." Button chose that moment to nose open another box, revealing a manila envelope labeled "Emergency Contact, Dad." Inside were copies of everything, Mara's insurance policy for the truth. Outside, Rook was probably still watching my apartment. But down here in the fluorescent dark, surrounded by a dead woman's careful documentation of corruption, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this all started. Certainty. We were going to expose them all. Rowan Pike's office smelled like espresso and deadline stress. My boss leaned back in his chair, fingers drummed against his desk as he reviewed my risk assessment memo for the third time. In-flight data integrity concerns, he read aloud. Recommend pre-deployment hardening audit. Ethan, we're 48 hours from go live. Lang's board meeting is Tuesday. Which is exactly why we need to be thorough. I kept my voice steady, professional. If there are vulnerabilities in their donation processing system, deploying our security stack without addressing them could expose us to liability. Rowan's eyes narrowed. What aren't you telling me? Everything, I thought. The phantom vendor codes, Mara's files, the systematic theft of microdonations. Instead, I said, I found some anomalous transaction patterns during my preliminary audit. Nothing I can prove yet, but enough to warrant caution. 48 hours, he said finally. Document everything. If you find actual problems, we fix them. If you're chasing ghosts, we deploy on schedule, and you explain to our biggest client why you wasted their time. The moment I left his office, my phone buzzed with a message from an encrypted number. Ava's burner. Check your secure drop. Gift from a guilty conscience. The file she'd uploaded made my hands shake. An email thread between Lang and someone named RRP Edmin, discussing donation overflow routing optimization and enhanced collection algorithms. The final message contained a single line that connected everything. Phantom pipeline approved. Estimated yield 2.3 million annually, minus VL. $2.3 million per year. Not thousands, millions. I immediately forwarded copies to Detective Alvarez with a chain of custody note and timestamps. Her response came within an hour. Compelling evidence. Need clean provenance and an on-record admission before I can move. Can you create that opportunity? Maya Tran called as I was encrypting backup files. I've been vetting your homeless paramedic friend. His story checks out. Former Austin Travis County EMS, exemplary record until he reported billing irregularities. Suddenly, there's a narcotics discrepancy in his locker. Career over. No pension. Classic retaliation pattern. Gets better. The medical director who signed off on his termination now sits on the Lang Foundation board, same guy who approved the ambulance diversion protocols your paramedic was questioning. I felt pieces clicking into place like puzzle fragments. Maya, I need to ask a favor. Tuesday's board meeting, I'm presenting our security demonstration. What if it became something more public? You want me to live stream your client presentation? I want you to document the moment we expose a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme, with Detective Alvarez standing by with warrants, and every piece of evidence properly authenticated. There was a long pause. That's either brilliant journalism or career suicide. Maybe both. For all of us, I agreed. But Mara Mercer documented this corruption for months before they killed her. If we don't act, her work dies with her. Send me everything. I'll verify sources, prepare the technical breakdown, and set up redundant streaming channels. But Ethan, once we do this, there's no taking it back. That night, I sat in my apartment reviewing the plan. Alvarez would position units nearby with sealed warrants. Maya would broadcast everything through multiple platforms. Ava had agreed to provide the final piece, API access logs showing the exact moment phantom donations were generated. But the linchpin was the boardroom itself. I needed Lang to incriminate himself on camera in front of witnesses who couldn't be intimidated or silenced.
My phone buzzed with a text from Eli. Mara's birthday would have been tomorrow. She'd be 26. Make it count. Button was sleeping on my couch, having somehow convinced my building security to let her and Eli shelter in the lobby during the storm. Even in sleep, her ears twitched at every sound, ready to alert her guardian to danger. Tuesday couldn't come soon enough. The Lang Foundation's boardroom felt like a glass cathedral, all cedar panels and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Austin. 12 leather chairs surrounded a table that probably cost more than most people's cars. I sat at the presentation podium, laptop connected, watching board members filter in with their coffee and confident smiles. Dr. Victor Lang entered last, perfectly pressed suit and silver hair that belonged on a magazine cover. He shook hands around the room, the consummate philanthropist, while Maya's discreet camera, disguised as a product demo recorder, captured everything. "Ethan, excellent work on the preliminary audit," Lang said, settling into his chair. "Rowan tells me you've identified some areas for optimization." Beside him, Rowan nodded encouragingly. He had no idea what was about to unfold. "That's correct." I opened my presentation, hands steadier than I'd expected. "I've prepared a comprehensive security demonstration focusing on anomaly detection in financial processing systems." The first slides were routine: threat vectors, encryption protocols, standard corporate security theater. Lang relaxed visibly, checking his phone. In the corner, Rook stood like a well-dressed statue, watching Maya's equipment with professional suspicion. Then I clicked to slide 15. "Now let's examine a real-world case study, a donation processing system with systematic irregularities." The screen filled with transaction flows, routing tables, and variance analyses. Notice the consistent drift between collected amounts and posted distributions. Lang's attention snapped back to the screen. "What system is this, Dr. Lang?" "Your system, Dr. Lang, the Lang Foundation's donation aggregation platform." I clicked once more, revealing the phantom vendor pathway. Specifically, unauthorized routing through entity designation rapid response partners. The room went dead quiet. Lang's face shifted from confusion to calculation to barely controlled fury. "I'm not sure what you think you found." "I found this." Ava's leaked email appeared on screen. Identities initially blurred. Internal communication approving the phantom pipeline. I clicked once more. "Sent from your personal account." The email header unblurred: vlang@langfoundation.org. "We routed microdonations to rapid response per my directive," Lang said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "That's standard operational protocol for emergency equipment purchases. Except Rapid Response Partners doesn't exist. It's a shell vendor routing funds to a private account under your control. $2.3 million annually skimmed from people donating their spare change." Rook moved toward Maya's camera setup, but Eli chose that moment to enter the boardroom with Button on a service animal vest, playing his part as my emotional support consultant. Button barked once, sharp, startling, as Rook reached for the equipment. In that second of distraction, Maya's feed automatically mirrored to backup servers and went live across 3 platforms. "You have no authority to make these accusations," Lang hissed, but it was too late. His admission was already recorded, broadcast, and spreading. Through the glass walls, I could see Detective Alvarez and 2 uniforms stepping off the elevator. "Actually, I have all the authority I need," along with warrants, witness statements, and 2 years of evidence compiled by Mara Mercer, the nursing student you had killed for asking too many questions. Lang's mask finally slipped completely. That girl was unstable. Her father filled her head with paranoid theories. Her father was right. "Dr. Lang, you're under arrest." Game over.
My phone buzzed with a text from Tessa. "Watching the stream from break room. Half the night shift is here. You did it, big brother." But it was Eli who provided the moment that broke my heart. He stepped forward, Button at his side, and faced the cameras with quiet dignity. "My daughter Mara tried to report this 2 years ago. She was 24, studying to be a nurse, volunteering because she wanted to help people." His voice was steady, strong. "They killed her for asking questions, but her questions didn't die with her." He pulled out a worn photo. Mara in scrubs, young and determined, holding a stethoscope like she was ready to take on the world. "This isn't about revenge. It's about making sure nobody else's daughter dies because someone decided to turn tragedy into profit." Rowan approached me as the last evidence bags were sealed. His face was stunned, processing the magnitude of what had unfolded during what should have been a routine client presentation. "Ethan, I don't know what to say. The firm will back you completely. Pro bono audit support, legal defense, whatever you need." "What I need," I said, watching Eli comfort Button as crime scene photographers documented everything,
is to make sure this can't happen again." Lang was led away in handcuffs, still protesting his innocence to anyone who would listen. But the numbers didn't lie. The emails were authentic, and Mara's voice would finally be heard in a courtroom. Outside the building, Maya wrapped her live stream with a promise. Full investigative report this weekend. Every document, every voice memo, every piece of evidence will be public record. Justice, as it turned out, was a long walk and a short statement. But it was also a beginning. Maya's studio was smaller than I had expected, cramped with recording equipment and walls lined with sound-dampening foam. She sat across from me, headphones around her neck, preparing for what she called the memorial episode. I want to play Mara's voice, not just the evidence, the person, the nursing student who cared about Roundup donations and stayed late to check her math. Through the studio monitors, Mara's voice filled the space again, warm and determined. "Dad, I know you think I'm being paranoid, but something's wrong with these numbers, really wrong." Maya interlaced the audio with photos Eli had provided. Mara's nursing school graduation, her volunteer badge, handwritten notes about donation discrepancies that showed careful, methodical thinking. A young woman who'd noticed what others had ignored. The district attorney's office has confirmed full restitution. The recovered funds will be distributed to affected clinics and community health programs. Additionally, Dr. Lang's medical licenses have been suspended pending criminal trial. But it was what happened next that surprised me. Detective Alvarez called personally to inform Eli that the narcotics discrepancy charges from 2 years ago had been formally dropped. The medical director who'd signed his termination, the same one who had approved the diversion protocols, was now under investigation for retaliation and evidence tampering. "Clear record," she said when she found us at the food truck park later that week. "Clean slate. The state's ready to discuss paramedic recertification if you're interested." Eli was quiet for a long moment, watching Button chase pigeons between the picnic tables. Mrs. Ortiz had brought him a plate of food he hadn't touched, too overwhelmed to eat. 2 years of being nobody, of people crossing the street to avoid me, and now they want me back? "Now they know they were wrong," I corrected. "There's a difference." Ava Brooks had found her courage, agreeing to testify before a state healthcare committee about algorithmic transparency in charitable giving. Her voice was still shaky, but her technical knowledge was unshakable. The committee chair promised new regulations requiring public auditing of all donation processing systems. Mara would have been 26 yesterday, Eli told Maya during their recorded interview. She wanted to work pediatric ICU, specialize in cardiac care, said little hearts needed the most protection. Maya's follow-up episodes drew millions of listeners. #Mara's began trending as other data analysts came forward with similar irregularities at foundations across the country. The story had legs, momentum, the kind of viral accountability that changes systems instead of just headlines. Standing in the studio, listening to Mara's voice echo through the monitors, I realized something profound. Revenge would have been personal, temporary, satisfying only to those who'd been wronged, but justice was architectural. It built guardrails, changed policies, protected people who hadn't even been born yet. Eli was right when he handed me that slip of paper. It had been time for revenge. But we chose something better. We chose to let Mara's voice stay alive in the work itself, in the reforms her questions had sparked, in the trust that could be rebuilt when people finally started listening to the right voices.
The community centers smelled like fresh coffee and possibility. Folding chairs arranged in semicircles faced a whiteboard covered in flowcharts and accountability measures. I stood before an audience of donors, food truck owners, hospital staff, and curious citizens who'd followed Maya's podcast series. Transparency isn't complicated, I explained, pointing to a simple diagram. Every donation gets a tracking number. Every vendor gets verified. Every algorithm gets audited quarterly by independent teams.
Mrs. Ortiz raised her hand. What about our jars, the physical donations? QR codes, Ava answered, from the front row, holding up her phone. Scan the jar, see real-time totals. No more guessing, no more drift. The Lang Foundation had been dissolved, its assets transferred to a community-managed health fund with board seats reserved for frontline workers, people like Tessa, who understood where the money needed to go. Dr. Lang pled guilty to avoid trial. 7 years, federal prison, full restitution. His medical network is under new management with strict oversight protocols. But it was Eli who provided the morning's most powerful moment. He approached the podium carrying a shadow box frame containing the original slip of paper, the revenge number, alongside Mara's nursing school badge and a photo of her holding Button as a puppy. My daughter believed in systems that protect people, he said, his voice clear and strong. She documented corruption not for revenge, but because she couldn't stand watching people get hurt while she stayed silent. The frame also held his new certification letter, Eli Mercer, paramedic, Austin, Travis County, with a start date next month. His hands were steady as he held it, no longer shaking from rage or grief, but grounded in purpose. Rowan had flown in from Dallas to announce our firm's new community audit program, with me as director. Ethan proved that the best security work happens when you protect the people, not just the data. Button dozed at my feet during the presentations, occasionally lifting her head when applause got too loud. She'd been staying with me while Eli attended recertification training, and we'd developed an easy routine. Morning walks, evening puzzles, mutual understanding that some loyalties transcend species. The Ortizes had returned their donation jar to the counter at Corazon de Ashton, now equipped with a QR code that displayed live tallies. The first day, they collected $43.62. The app showed exactly that amount, plus a timestamp, plus a direct link to see where every penny went. It's not perfect, I told the audience as we wrapped up. No system ever is, but it's honest. And when people trust the system, they participate. When they participate, we all get stronger. As people filtered out, Maya approached with her recording equipment powered down. One last question, she said. Was it worth it? Everything you risked? I looked around the room, Eli packing up his new medical textbooks, Ava explaining blockchain verification to a curious teenager, Button stretching after her nap, Mrs. Ortiz hugging Tessa like they were old friends. Kindness lit the fuse, but justice keeps the lights on. The revenge number had become something none of us expected, a blueprint for accountability, a memorial to someone who died trying to protect others, and proof that sometimes the best way to honor the dead is to keep their questions alive. Button barked once, not alarm, just acknowledgement, and trotted toward the door. Time to go home, her posture suggested. Time to rest before tomorrow's work began. Outside, Austin's late summer heat was already building, cicadas warming up for their daily symphony. But the sound felt different now, not ominous but persistent, like voices that refused to be silenced, questions that demanded better answers, and the steady rhythm of systems learning to work the way they were always supposed to. Some revenge, it turned out, was worth waiting for.